Morning. My name is Donna Fujioka, and on behalf of Pastor Teresa Ninan Soto, worship producer Vincent Rains, and others on the worship team, welcome to worship service with the First Unitarian Church of Oakland. Please note that we are recording this service. If you don't want to be in the recording, please keep your camera turned off. You will find this and other services on our website. For the best viewing experience, we recommend that you install the Zoom app on your device and update to the latest version. I am a member of the Journey Toward Wholeness transformation team, and we are glad that you are here. We are an intentionally multi-generational, multiracial, multicultural, inclusive, and anti-oppressive religious community. You are welcome here. We invite you to fill out the guest connection card you will see in the chat. We want to be able to support your exploration of what's available in our community that interests you and how you might participate. Welcome. Now, before we begin our worship service, we have a few reminders. After service today, we will have our first Sunday anti-racism discussion and practice. We'll see the link in the chat. And then on Thursday, October 28th, the October Book Club will meet from 6:30 to 9:30. And finally, Ron Weisberg and Pastor Ninan's For the Love of Poetry workshop will begin on Tuesday, October 5th. This is this coming Tuesday from 7 to 8:30 on Zoom. So if you need a sign-up link, please email yesplease@uuoakland.com. Thank you. And now we will have our chalice lighting.
Today, we light the chalice with words from Ella Fitzgerald. And as I found them, and as I considered her life, one thing that really stood out to me was that, but for a chance piece of paper in a random drawing, Ella Fitzgerald wouldn't have sung at the Apollo Theater, and we might have missed her entirely. Ella offers these words: simplemente no renuncies a lo que intentas hacer. Donde hay amor e inspiración, no creo que puedas equivocarte.
Just don't give up what you're trying to do. Where there is love and inspiration, I don't think you can go wrong. We also light our Black Lives Matter candle, recalling the words of Nelson Mandela. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. Last month, Oakland passed a sorrowful milestone, the 100th homicide in the city. May the light of our peace candle illuminate that in the interdependent web of all existence, each and every one of us undeniably is connected to every victim and to every perpetrator of violence. And may the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. guide us to peace. Nonviolence means avoiding not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, but you refuse to hate him. And now we will unmute our microphones and greet our neighbors.
Hello, neighbors. Hi, Natalie. Hi, Aron.
Welcome to church, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Aloha.
Terry McCauley. Look, it's Aram.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Hi,
Dick.
hi, Helen.
Hey.
Hi,
Kathy,
Hi, Ron. Hi,
Hey,
Dick.
Ron,
Hi.
Hey, MJ.
Emily,
John
Greg,
Shinnick. Hello.
Penny,
Sarah,
Paul. Hi,
Ron,
babe, Laurel,
Hey,
Reverend
Emily.
North.
Hi,
Laurel.
John.
Hi, Laurel.
May everyone hear their name at
Morning,
least once.
Sarah.
Yay.
Laurel, I can
Morning,
honor
everybody.
Mary Teresa,
Thank
Heidi.
you.
Hey, Kathy.
Mary.
And now let's
So good to see
mute
you
our
all.
microphones again and turn off our cameras. Janet will offer a reflection.
Morning, everyone. I'm trying something a little different today. I'm trying to read my piece from my file, and I'll be scrolling down, and it sometimes doesn't work right. But I do have a backup. I have paper if I need it. Why we need an eighth principle. That's the topic today for my talk. It starts out with a quote from our covenant. Our first agreement of our covenant states, quote, to encourage and grow relationships with one another based on mutual understanding and respect. This is the first agreement of our covenant here at First Unitarian, also known as FUCO. It is the basis for our query this morning. What does it mean to be a people of relationship? And what does the addition of an eighth principle have to do with it? Foucault's foundational agreements, our mission, vision, ends, and covenant, imply anti-racism, but only state anti-oppression. The phrase that is included in all those agreements is beloved community. This, I believe, is our deep goal, our deep desire. What is beloved community? The idea was developed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as part of the nonviolent approach to making changes in an unjust society. We have incorporated the phrase and perhaps the concept, but perhaps not the understanding that beloved community is the result of struggling with our differences and rooting out the evils which give rise to the injustice. We have to actually confront and dismantle our UU culture, which is a culture based in white supremacy, in order to make space for beloved community, in order to make space for communities that are not necessarily white, highly educated, middle class, etc. Our principles, which come from the denomination, lay out guidelines for our lives, but mostly address individual action. References to mutuality, responsibility to others, embedment in a web of interconnection are somewhat secondary or implied. Anti-racism and anti-oppression are implied, but they're not stated. But if all these things are in our documents, why do we need a principle that spells them out? Let's read it together. Vince, could you put up the slide, please? So please unmute yourself and recite it with me. We, the member
Congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association,
Covenant
Covenant
to approve
and
promote
journeying
towards
spiritual
spiritual wholeness
by
working to build a diverse,
multicultural,
multicultural,
beloved
beloved community
by our
by actions
that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions.
Thank you for that lovely cacophony. Now, please mute again. So, what is different? What is different in this principle? What's different is spelling out the call for individual UUs to actively work to dismantle racism in ourselves and in our institutions, and to be able to account to our communities how we have applied ourselves to this work. How have we applied ourselves to dismantling white supremacy? A dear member stated that the word or a phrase, accountably dismantle, in addition to being dreadful syntax, is a little scary. What does that mean? One church set a goal that 50% of their core active members will be trained, comfortable with, and committed to using tools of anti-racism within 5 years. This is an accountable goal. It's measurable. You can decide, did we achieve that? Do we have our 50% yet? But more simply, we could do something similar, or more simply, accountability means that the feedback from our members who are BIPOC is closer to being what we all wish to experience for ourselves. That is, to feel loved, to belong, to be a vital member of the beloved community. But why change our principles, the guiding tenets of our denomination? Well, in doing research into our principles, I was astonished to learn that they did not spring fully formed from the brow of a UU God at the beginning of time. In fact, our principles, as stated, are the result of UU women starting in 1977, working to remove sexist language from the 1961 articles, which merged Unitarianism and Universalism. They found and had removed dozens of references that suggested Unitarian Universalism is a religion of men. Unsurprisingly, there was pushback. The word mankind, they said, includes women. Women replied, but first it excludes us, and then we become a footnote. That is no longer acceptable. But then they realized that a bigger reset was necessary. They had a conference, these are religious ancestors, on the topic, quote, do UU principles affirm us as women? Unquote. Unsurprisingly, they found that they did not, and they began to write the 7 principles as we know them today. The first 6 were restatements of language already in the articles. The 7th was in honor of the environmental movement. The principles still mainly applied to individual actions, but the lens included community, responsibility, and relationship as they had not before. And this is where the 8th principle comes from. Our BIPOC members and leaders feel that their liberation being implied by the use of the phrase beloved community is not enough. Even here at Foucault, as hard as we have worked, it remains an unfulfilled promise. We need to state our commitment and see it as an essential part of our Unitarian Universalist identity. So let me read the 8th principle to you. This time, close your eyes and try on what it feels like in your body to make a deep commitment to our BIPOC members and to our mission, vision, ends, and deeply held desire for beloved community. We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. May we embrace it and affirm it and live it. But first, let us vote to adopt it in December here in Oakland. May it be so. And now we will sing a song or listen to the song. You can sing along with your microphone turned off, Sia Hamba with the Chancel Choir.
Hamba
In just a moment, I will share with you a video, and it's from Amaryllis Fox. She used to be in the CIA, and what the video talks about is people's perception of truth. It's part of our exploration today. If we invite you to consider the eighth principle, part of the question is how? Out of all the possibilities. So I would like to begin that now.
If I learned one lesson from my time with the CIA, it is this. Everybody believes they're the good guy. I was an officer with the CIA clandestine service and worked undercover on counterterrorism and intelligence all around the world for almost 10 years. The conversation that's going on in the United States right now about ISIS and about the United States overseas is more oversimplified than ever. Ask most Americans whether ISIS poses an existential threat to this country, and they'll say yes. That's where the conversation stops. If you're walking down the street in Iraq or Syria and ask anybody why America dropped bombs, you get, they were waging war on Islam. And you walk in America and you ask, why were we attacked on 9/11? And you get, they hate us because we're free. Those are stories manufactured by a really small number of people on both sides who amass a great deal of power and wealth by convincing the rest of us to keep killing each other. I think the question we need to be asking as Americans examining our foreign policy is whether or not we're pouring kerosene on a candle. The only real way to disarm your enemy is to listen to them. If you hear them out, if you're brave enough to really listen to their story, you can see that more often than not, you might have made some of the same choices if you'd lived their life instead of yours. An Al-Qaeda fighter made a point once during a debriefing. He said all these movies that America makes, like Independence Day and Hunger Games and Star Wars, they're all about a small, scrappy band of rebels who will do anything in their power with the limited resources available to them to expel an outside, technologically advanced invader. And what you don't realize, he said, is that to us, to the rest of the world, you are the Empire, and we are Luke and Han. You are the aliens, and we are Will Smith. But the truth is, when you talk to the people who are really fighting on the ground, on both sides, and ask them why they're there, they answer with hopes for their children, specific policies that they think are cruel or unfair. And while it may be easier to dismiss your enemy as evil, hearing them out on policy concerns is actually an amazing thing, because as long as your enemy is a subhuman psychopath that's going to attack you no matter what you do, this never ends. But if your enemy is a policy, however complicated, that we can work with.
Thank you for going on that journey with me. I want us to continue to think about what it means when we talk about what we know. And now I'd like to invite Corliss to share with us. Thank you so much, Corliss.
Tamara, another member of our congregation, recently recommended to me a book called Together, The Healing Power of Human Connection in a Sometimes Lonely World, written by Vivek Murthy, who was a Surgeon General of the US during the Obama years. Together, as you might expect from the title, is about relationships and how essential they are to human life. Dr. Murthy presented an astounding statistic. 1/3 of our population report that they are lonely. Loneliness is, in fact, the most reported human problem. Of course, almost everyone is lonely sometimes, And many people are lonely all the time without enough meaningful, satisfying connections to other people. Most of us appreciate solitude, but loneliness is different. Solitude is chosen, loneliness isn't. It's a kind of malnutrition or even starvation. One might respond to this fact by saying, well, if someone is lonely, the solution to their problem is to go out and meet other people. But where and how? While it's true that being with people heals loneliness, there's a weird complication that makes loneliness even worse. Dr. Murthy writes that people who feel lonely are often ashamed of feeling that way. We blame ourselves for our loneliness and think that to say we're lonely is to be pathetic. Of course, we have our pride. We don't want to be seen as pathetic, so we hide our loneliness. Years ago, I learned about a New York political movement that practiced what they called social therapy. They started with the assumption that it's not just the individual who's responsible for problems such as loneliness, but in fact, healing starts with realizing that the problem stems from the way society is organized. That is, the social organization in which we grow up, and are educated, and in which we work, doesn't do very much to promote connection. It often discourages it. It creates loneliness. In a consumer society, loneliness is often a state in which people are more receptive to the constant aggression of advertising. The constant barrage of advertising normalizes consumption as a desirable way of life, if not, in fact, the only way. Brand names are constantly in front of us. We're coaxed, for example, to imagine ourselves as a rebel through driving a particular car, conveniently omitting that this same rebel image is being offered to millions of other people. You could buy this experience of feeling a rebel, according to the ad. Or other ads suggest that consuming this or that kind of alcohol signals our coolness or class. We could be at the center of a group of attractive people, enjoying themselves in the presence of a particular kind of beer, for example. There will be lots of laughing. Associating products with happy socializing is one of advertising's most used methods. They like us to be in a hurry or to think that such a constant state is normal. We're urged to hurry on down, don't wait, time is running out. From advertising's point of view, anxiety is a desirable state. In a consumer society, it often makes sense to treat other people mainly as consumers. Most importantly, to isolate consumers into the smallest possible units so as to sell more things. Ideally, for producers, everyone would buy one of everything. For people to share a thing means one less sale. Personally, I try to shield myself from as much advertising as possible as it puts me into such a bad mood. A good deal of Dr. Vivek Murthy's book, Together, tells stories about how lonely people discovered some of the causes of their loneliness, recognizing the desire to connect with others as a natural human need and doing things about it, connecting based on shared interests or shared projects. Providing places for people to go. Going against our conditioning by reaching out to someone else is a start. People need spaces to go where they can be with others who share their values. For example, as expressed in the 7 or perhaps 8 principles of Unitarian Universalism. And crucially, it's important that people feel like they belong. A sense of belonging is important to most people. We're involved in families, our birth families, and those we create through our own lives. Our workplaces, sports teams, and our churches can give us the sense of belonging. Some UUs of color have not felt like they belong to UU churches. They have been lonely there. So we're trying to understand that and make it a thing of the past. Years ago, the wonderful Rebecca Reverend, Rebecca Parker, spoke in our church. At the time, she was the president of the Star King School for the Ministry. She told a story about how when she was in her 20s, she was explaining to her grandmother that she and her friends were joining together to start an institution to accomplish things as a group that they couldn't achieve on their own individually, that they were going to help each other and be friends based on their shared beliefs. As she spoke, her grandmother was smiling and nodding. Rebecca said, "Do you think it will work, Grandma?" Her grandmama replied, "Oh, yes, it will, dear. We called it a church." I wish I could convey how charming this story was in the voice of Rebecca Parker. I'll wrap up this musing and meditation on connecting with other people with an example from Kurt Vonnegut in his hilarious and desperate novel, Cat's Cradle. He invented a delightful notion. He invented a social formation called a charas. A charas is a team whereby God organizes people to get things done. One's charas could be very large, everyone you come into contact with in your life, or quite small. In Vonnegut's imagination, there was also the dupras. This was a charas consisting of just two people, a very, very rare occurrence. I'm fond of the idea of the charas because it makes me feel my connection to others. It makes me feel like a part of the whole. I enjoy thinking of our church as a charas, a cosmically organized team to get things done. One of the important things is to be with each other so we are not lonely. This week, I went to a Zoom meeting to talk about the proposed addition of the 8th principle to the current 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism. What thoughtful, interesting people were there. I'm glad I'm in this charas. I want to give it more. I think we're doing pretty well, but we can go further by coming closer. In the coming weeks, I hope there will be discussion of how we might do this. Come closer.
And in just a moment, I'll lead and ask you to join me in prayer or contemplation. Spirit of life and love, in our midst, yet ever so elusive. To breathe your sacred name is a blessing. Your world become, your will be done here on earth, inspired by our aspirations to do and be better people. May we all have that what we need to survive, live, and thrive. Remind us to be gentle. May we love mercy and kindness, recalling the times when we've fallen short ourselves. Call us to be firm. May we not be tempted to follow selfish motivations or reside in our narrow privileges, unexamined and uninterrogated. Move us to counter and overcome evil and injustice in ourselves, our lives, our institutions. Though we didn't hear any words spoken, we each and all carry concern for the people we love, for people who are ill both near and far. We think of our elders with health challenges. We think of our families with children going to school. We pray for safety for them, their classmates, their teachers. There is much suffering all around us, and we know yours is the beloved community, the fire of commitment in our hearts, and the spirit of generosity and abundance now and always. As we close, please unmute your microphone and say, "We hold them in our care," or type it in the chat.
We hold them in our
Hold
care.
them in our care.
Hold them in our care.
Hold them in our care.
And I have a few things to share with you that did come through the chat. Shout out to people who demonstrated yesterday to maintain abortion rights in our country. And gratitude for worship. We hold with Carol Lane, Her brother, David Miner, died October 28 from cancer, and there will be a celebration of his life in Houston this Saturday. And she's chosen not to go because of concern over COVID. Please convey your care and sympathy to Carol in this time. Now we'll go ahead. We have Prelude in D minor by Bach. So thankful for John Kelly's music here and that beautiful piece. Today we will be wearing and not wearing hats during this reflection. Do you have a hat? Let me see. Here's mine. Let me see yours. I see you grabbing your hat. Very well. If you're not able to grab one, don't worry, but if you are, you're invited to. Let me tell you about what happened on June 7, 1892. Homer Plessy walked into the Press Street Depot in New Orleans, bought a first-class train ticket to Covington, and boarded the East Louisiana Railroad No. 8 train. As the train pulled away from the station, the conductor asked the light-complexioned Plessy, and this uses historical language. We no longer call people colored people, but I would like to use the term here, knowing a couple of things. First, each person decides what they get to be called. Second, colored particularly is troublesome because it was a comparison morally with white-skinned people. And if I leave a blank there, the story makes less sense. So just remember, we don't use this word, and it's historical in this particular case. So Plessy said he was a colored man, and the conductor told him to move to the colored car. Homer Plessy refused. I am an American citizen. I have paid for a first-class ticket and intend to ride to Covington in the first-class car. The conductor stopped the train, and Detective Christopher Kane boarded the car, arrested Plessy, and forcibly dragged him off the train with the help of a few other passengers. Walt Whitman once said, "I wear my hat as I please, indoors or out." When I say hats, please, you can either put your hat on or leave it off. Here's our first instance. Hats, please. People sometimes think of Rosa Parks as just a tired woman on a bus, when she was actually a trained, organized, and connected operative for liberation. The same is true for Homer Plessy. And Plessy, a shoemaker by trade, was Creole. He and several other free Creole people of color got a lawyer to challenge the Separate Car Act of 1890, segregation on railroads. And they formed, as a group, the Citizens Committee to test the constitutionality of the Separate Car Act. It's a pretty long group name. Hats, please. The question, which train car someone should go in, is as blurry a category as who is and isn't wearing a hat in this moment. even though he could pass for white, hat or no hat. Homer Plessy and other mixed-race professionals in New Orleans decided that they would resist, specifically the denial of their rights under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. The 14th Amendment is the source of the words that you may know by heart. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness without due process of laws. Homer Plessy's case went all the way to the Supreme Court. This part of the story has lots of twists and turns, so hold on to your hat. The point of the court case was to desegregate train travel. The point was for everyone to be able to live the same, be treated the same under rules and laws. Hats, please. Associate Supreme Court Justice Henry Billings Brown wrote the majority opinion for the case. He argued, I need you to know this, even though it's about a case, because it really explains something about how we think of getting to separate but equal. He argued that the Separate Car Act didn't conflict with the 14th Amendment because that amendment was only intended to secure the legal equality of African Americans, not their social equality. And in the way that everyone thinks that they're the good guy, Justice Brown was the man that his time minted. He had the right education, the right connections, the right dispassionate view of the law. And all that led him to a conclusion that doesn't hold up now, that didn't age well. All the while, in real life, separate but equal did not work. It was only separate and never came close to being equal. And we understand Plessy versus Ferguson to be a moment in American history when the work was not done, when freedom was only partially achieved. Hats, please. How do we choose who gets to be free and who only deserves part of their rights as a person? Some of you may have this question. Why an eighth principle when we already have 7 that talk about some of the same things? Today, I want to remind you that in the same way that separate but equal actually meant separate and separate, in the same way that Plessy versus Ferguson left the making of equality into law undone, we as a congregation and a Unitarian Universalist movement have work left to do. Shannon Lang, a Black member of the Unitarian Church of Evanston, Illinois, describes part of the challenge this way. I love my congregation, but as a Black woman, before I enter the doors of my church or a committee meeting, I often feel like I have to put on my armor. Chances are someone's going to say something hurtful. They're not going to mean it, but it's going to happen, and I've got to gird myself up for the unintended pain that will come. I know my siblings in faith love me, and I love them too. But it has happened time and again. Lane goes on to say, I'm not alone in this. It's a common experience for Black and other UUs of color. She says, I identify with the findings of a 2018 survey that Black Lives of UU conducted of Black UUs. Most Black UUs feel a deep sense of isolation and rely heavily on social media to connect with other Black UUs. Black people tend to become part of UU congregations because of the theology, not because of the community. White dominant culture gets in the way of their communal experience, and serves as an exclusionary force in church life. Simply put, Black people, when they show up in ways that are culturally divergent from white, middle, and upper class culture, do not feel welcome. Hats, please. Who is welcome and who isn't? How do we know? And Gloria Steinem, white feminist activist educator, offers that God may be in the details, but the goddess is in the questions. Once we begin to ask them, there is no turning back. My question for us is, what is our part in this? You have the opportunity to embrace the growing edges before us. Will you? How much liberation is enough? If Black Unitarian Universalists, and Miss Lang is not alone in the story of her experience, are telling us that they do not feel welcomed, what will be our response? It might be tempting to suppose that we here are different. And you are strong and beautiful and diverse in a lot of ways. But you are not exempt from this specific challenge. Ms. Lang goes on to say, the impact of these experiences, regardless of intention, is clear. The lack of Black and brown faces in our spaces speaks volumes. I've shared with you before that one of the questions I ask myself in preparing a reflection like this is, what's the most important thing that I can say? Today, it is that the lack of welcome and inclusion is only part of the story and not the end of the story. The fact that this problem also occurs in other places with other Unitarian Universalists can be a clue to you that we aren't talking about something that is specific to you. Rather, it is a problem that is replicated through our systems, the way we do things, the unspoken expectations that we hold, and more. For a systemic problem like racism and a lack of being pro-everybody, a systemic solution is required. A shared goal, common language to share our aspiration. How much liberation is enough? All of it. All the liberation for all of the people by every ethical means at our disposal. This includes a principle to specify that we are pro-everybody and that we include skin of every single color in our definition of people who matter. Hats, please. Categories are not for people. All people are human. All people matter. Hat, no hat, invisible hat. All people matter. This summer, I took a class in nonviolence from the King Center, which is directed by Dr. Bernice King, the daughter of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One of the things I understood from that class was that nonviolence is the non-anxious practice of justice. I sometimes receive this question, sure, Reverend Soto, I understand being anti-racist, but what are we for? This is part of that answer. We are pro-everybody. The question that follows is, will you decide to not just feel pro-everybody or just think pro-everybody, but also speak pro-everybody and act pro-everybody? That is the practice of justice. We are here for freedom, for liberation, and the thing that sometimes feels like a paradox in community. We are here precisely to free one another. The eighth principle will help us do this by centering the work ahead. Consider this encouragement from Black abolitionist and orator Frederick Douglass. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. The invitation to embrace the work of the eighth principle and adopt its words is an invitation to you to move to the edge where the work is happening. We can favor freedom with our dispositions, our opinions, our attitudes, but I would ask you to move beyond deprecating it. In this case, challenge any story that you may be holding that this is not valuable work. Challenge quibbles you may have with the method. Not me challenge them. You already hear me saying this really matters. You challenge them. Do this especially by being curious. Ask yourself what it could be like if people could come here and consistently and crystal clearly have experiences of belonging and belovedness. The invitation to embrace the work of the eighth principle is to a specific kind of agitation, as Douglass references it. It is an invitation to change, the fruit of which will be in a future that is still being defined. And as people experiencing transition, people becoming fluent in change, you are equipped for this moment. And the moment is not static. So I offer you this advice from Black jazz musician and composer, Miles Davis. It's not about standing still and becoming safe. If anyone wants to keep creating, they have to be about change. Hats, please. We each and all change, but changing as a community is an everybody commitment. Leaning into the obvious question, what for? Besides an internal adjustment of how we think and talk about being anti-racist and pro-everybody, the eighth principle also represents a truing up of how we relate to the world. If we are the ones we have been waiting for, it is time to stop waiting and start moving forward. This is the action component of cultivating relationships. Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us this way. To commit to another person is to embark on a very adventurous journey. You must be very wise and very patient to keep your love alive so that it will last for a long time. The first year of a committed relationship can already reveal how difficult it is. When you commit to someone, you have a beautiful image of them, and you marry that image rather than the person. When you live with each other 24 hours a day, you begin to discover the reality of the other person, which doesn't quite correspond with the image you have of him or her. This is how it is one thing to commit to people of color in the abstract, and yet quite another to take the actions that will improve the material conditions by which we mean the factors of their lived experience of people of color in your own congregation, in your own denomination, in your own city. I want to close today by inviting you to enter into discernment with the eighth principle. How much liberation? All of it. For whom? Every single person. Of what race? Every single race, mixed race, and more. For what? For relationships and experiences of belonging and belovedness. Will you, as appropriate, ask what's in the way of yes? Respect whatever that is. Do not deny it. It is information. But do not stop there either. Allow yourself the possibility that the barrier to yes may be better if you move it. And you are the one who will have to lead that dance and exploration, though I will continue to invite and support your adventure with it. Hats, please. For whom is liberation? People like you? People different from you? Is it for you? The eighth principle represents an opportunity to center a commitment beyond business as usual and go beyond where we are to the beloved community we dream about. May it be so. May we be the ones to make it so.
Amen to that. Thank you, Pastor Teresa. Good morning, folks. Our time together is precious. More so, of course, when we're physically together and we don't have the limitations of all these screens and other technology to deal with. That day when we can put aside the screens and actually come back together in person is coming, however slowly it may be. It's mainly what church is and always has been about for us, being together. That and communicating about what feels most important for us, spiritually and otherwise. We still have some sense of that, and when we're back together in person, it will be much more fully realized. That's why it's important to keep supporting the church now, so it will be there for all of us when the time comes. Well, in terms of financially supporting the church, we will provide about 90 seconds right now to do that, if you will, while the music plays. And now, please read along with me, though it would be better if you stay muted, with the words on the screen. To the work of the church, which is weaving
a tapestry of
love we call community, we dedicate ourselves and these our offerings. Thank you. Now we will have our closing song, which is For Everyone Born, sung by the Crescendo Choir. Please sing along, but stay muted so everyone can hear the choir alone. Thank you.
For everyone born, a place in the
Really grateful for the choir, that beautiful music. Will you join me in a smooth, easy breath? And now I'll close in a word of prayer and meditation. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones we have been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we have been waiting for. Words of June Jordan in Poem for South African Women, which she presented at the UN on August 9th, 1978. Go in peace, practice love.